I would rather lose everything than lose my family. It sounds noble, almost sacred, the kind of promise that deserves admiration. But what if that single sentence is also the beginning of every terrible decision a person will ever make? On the morning of his daughter's wedding, Don Vito Corleone barely touched the celebration waiting outside. Music drifted through the open windows. Children chased one another across the garden. Friends laughed as if nothing in the world could ever threaten this family. Inside his office, however, the atmosphere belonged to another world. People entered one by one, not to congratulate him, but to ask for justice they believed the law could not provide. Vito listened more than he spoke. He rarely raised his voice. He rarely appeared angry. His power came from something far more unsettling. He could make impossible choices sound completely reasonable. When a frightened father begged for help after his daughter had been brutalized and abandoned by a legal system that refused to punish the men responsible, Vito did not answer immediately. Instead, he asked a simple question. Why did you come to me only after the courts failed you? It was not about pride. It was about loyalty. Every relationship, every favor, every promise inside Vito's world rested on one belief: family protects those who belong. Not because it is fair, because abandoning your own is the greatest betrayal imaginable. That belief made him seem honorable. It also made him dangerous. Outside the mansion, Michael Corleone stood beside Kay Adams, smiling politely as relatives introduced themselves. Unlike his older brothers, Michael looked almost detached from the family business. He had served his country. He spoke like an ordinary American. He carried himself as though his future belonged somewhere far away from old traditions and whispered negotiations. When Kay looked curiously toward the office where visitors kept disappearing, Michael smiled. "That is my family," he said quietly. "It is not me." For a brief moment, it was easy to believe him. The wedding continued beneath warm sunlight. Cameras flashed. Glasses were raised. Laughter echoed through the estate. It looked like a family celebrating love. No one could see that another kind of promise was quietly being renewed behind closed doors. Every favor accepted today would demand another favor tomorrow. Every act of protection would create another obligation. Every debt repaid with loyalty would slowly reshape the people who believed they were simply taking care of one another. Then the celebration ended. Cars departed. Music faded. The house finally grew quiet. That was when the first crack appeared. Word arrived that powerful rivals were preparing to challenge the Corleone family. Their proposal promised enormous wealth, but it required something Vito refused to sacrifice. He believed some lines, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. He declined. It sounded like a moral decision. It felt like an act of responsibility. To everyone around him, he was protecting the family from a future that would poison everything they stood for. Yet in that single refusal lay a consequence no one fully understood. Because once someone convinces himself that every choice is being made for the people he loves, every future compromise begins to wear the face of devotion instead of ambition. And the most dangerous journey does not begin when someone chooses evil. It begins when someone becomes certain that love leaves them no other choice. The offer had been rejected, but the danger did not disappear with the conversation. It simply changed shape. Inside the Corleone household, nobody spoke openly about fear. Fear was considered useful only if it sharpened judgment. The moment it became visible, it became a weakness that others could exploit. So life continued. Meals were shared. Business was conducted. Children laughed in rooms untouched by the quiet calculations taking place elsewhere. From the outside, nothing appeared different. That illusion became one of the family's greatest strengths, and one of its greatest blind spots. Tom Hagen watched the change before anyone else admitted it existed. As the family's trusted advisor, he noticed how every discussion now ended with the same phrase. "It is for the family." The words settled every disagreement. They ended every debate. No one questioned whether the decision itself was right. They only asked whether it would keep the family safe. The distinction was disappearing. Vito himself believed he was preserving something precious. He refused opportunities that violated his principles. He avoided unnecessary conflict. He preferred negotiation over intimidation whenever possible. Yet every careful decision carried an unexpected cost. The more responsibility he accepted for protecting everyone, the less freedom anyone around him possessed to make their own mistakes. Protection slowly became permission. Permission quietly became control. Michael observed all of this from a distance. He still insisted that his future belonged somewhere else. When Kay asked why everyone treated his father with such unusual respect, Michael searched for an answer that would make sense outside the walls of his family. "He helps people," he finally said. The sentence sounded simple. It also concealed everything that made it complicated. Helping people, in the Corleone world, was never a single act. It created loyalty. Loyalty created obligation. Obligation created expectations that lasted for years, sometimes for generations. No contract was ever signed. No law demanded repayment. Yet everyone understood the debt. Michael recognized that system, but he still believed he could remain outside it. He believed love for his family did not require becoming part of its machinery. Then another conversation quietly shifted something inside him. Vito spoke with one of his sons about the future. His voice remained calm. "A man who does not spend time with his family can never be a real man." It was not spoken as manipulation. It sounded like wisdom passed from one generation to another. And perhaps that was exactly why it was so powerful. The sentence carried warmth. It also carried weight. Because once family becomes the highest moral authority, every competing value begins to lose its place. Individual dreams, personal convictions, even conscience itself. One by one, they can all be redefined as selfish if they appear to threaten those closest to you. Nobody in the room recognized the transformation while it was happening. There was no dramatic declaration, no sudden betrayal, only a series of small choices, each defended by the same sincere intention. Keep the family together. Keep them safe. Protect what matters. Each decision sounded compassionate when viewed alone. Together, they slowly built a world where questioning those decisions felt almost like questioning love itself. And that was the quiet trap. Not because anyone had abandoned morality overnight, but because morality had begun to answer to a single standard. Whatever preserved the family must be justified. Once that belief takes root, the conscience does not disappear. It simply learns to speak with a different voice. The first sign that something had changed was not fear. It was silence. People who had once offered advice now paused before speaking. Family dinners still gathered everyone around the same table, but conversations became more careful, almost rehearsed. Nobody wanted to introduce another problem into a house already carrying invisible weight. Vito noticed the silence. He mistook it for trust. "If they are not arguing," he once told Tom Hagen, "it means they know I will make the right decision." Tom nodded, but his expression lingered somewhere between agreement and concern. He understood something that Vito could not fully see. When one person's judgment becomes unquestionable, love and obedience begin to resemble each other. The difference is easy to lose. Sonny, by contrast, had little patience for careful restraint. He believed strength should be visible. "If people think we hesitate," he argued one evening, "they will keep pushing." Vito looked at his eldest son without anger. "Strength is not measured by how quickly you answer every challenge." Sonny leaned forward. "Then how is it measured?" "By how many challenges never happen because people already know your answer." The room fell quiet. Both men wanted the same thing. Both wanted the family to survive. Yet they were already speaking two different languages. One believed protection came from restraint. The other believed protection came from certainty. Neither realized that both paths shared the same destination. The belief that every choice made for the family deserved moral permission. Michael listened without joining the discussion. Months earlier, these conversations would have sounded distant, almost foreign. Now they lingered in his thoughts long after they ended. He noticed something else as well. Whenever someone questioned a decision, the discussion rarely focused on whether it was ethically right. Instead, the question became painfully simple. Will this keep the family safe? Once that question appeared, every other concern quietly stepped aside. Personal happiness, individual freedom, private dreams, even disagreement itself. Safety became the highest virtue. And once safety occupies the highest place, almost any sacrifice begins to sound reasonable. Kay sensed the distance growing inside Michael before he admitted it himself. "You have been somewhere else lately," she told him during an afternoon walk. "I have just been thinking about your father." Michael smiled faintly. About responsibility. She waited. He continued slowly. When you grow up believing someone has spent their entire life protecting you, it becomes difficult to tell where gratitude ends and obligation begins. Kay reached for his hand. You are allowed to choose your own life. He wanted to believe that. He truly did. But every time he imagined walking away, another thought followed close behind. Who protects the people you love if you decide not to? It was an impossible question because it offered no answer that felt morally complete. Back inside the Corleone home, Vito continued making careful decisions, convinced that every compromise avoided today spared his children from greater suffering tomorrow. He never demanded gratitude. He never asked anyone to worship him. He simply carried more burdens than anyone else. The tragedy was not that his family failed to appreciate the sacrifice. The tragedy was that they slowly stopped believing they could carry any part of it themselves. Without intending to, Vito had become more than a father. He had become the center around which every moral decision revolved. The safer everyone felt beneath his protection, the less capable they became of imagining life beyond it. And when an entire family begins to believe that one person alone can stand between order and disaster, succession is no longer about inheritance. It becomes a question of who is willing to bear a burden that eventually reshapes the soul of whoever accepts it. Michael did not step forward because he hungered for power. He stepped forward because an empty space had appeared. And in families built around responsibility, empty spaces rarely stay empty for long. The change happened so gradually that almost nobody recognized it while it was unfolding. At first, Michael only listened. He attended meetings he once avoided. He asked questions instead of offering opinions. He watched how Tom organized conversations before they became arguments. He watched how Sonny mistook urgency for strength. Most of all, he watched his father carry the emotional weight of every decision, absorbing fear before anyone else had to feel it. One evening, after everyone had left the room, Vito remained seated by the window. You have been paying attention, he said without looking up. Michael smiled politely. I am only trying to understand. Vito nodded. Understanding comes before judgment. There was nothing manipulative in his voice. He was offering advice the way any father might. Yet beneath those simple words rested an invisible inheritance. To understand the family meant accepting that every difficult choice carried a hidden cost. But it also meant accepting that someone still had to make it. Days later, another disagreement surfaced. A trusted associate suggested avoiding involvement in a growing dispute outside the family. The risk seemed unnecessary. Sonny dismissed the caution almost immediately. If we appear passive now, he insisted, others will assume we are weak. Tom responded carefully. If we react to every challenge, we allow everyone else to decide our future. The room turned toward Michael. For the first time, nobody asked him to stay silent. What do you think? Vito asked. Michael hesitated. Only a year earlier, he would have refused to answer. Now he spoke with surprising calm. People are watching more than our decisions. They are watching whether we remain predictable. Sonny frowned. So we do nothing. Michael shook his head. No, we choose only the battles that protect what actually matters. The discussion continued, but something irreversible had already happened. Michael was no longer standing outside the family. He had begun thinking from inside it. The shift was subtle. His language had changed before his identity did. He no longer asked what was right for himself. He asked what was necessary for everyone else. Kay noticed the difference almost immediately. When they met for dinner, she spoke about ordinary plans. A future home. A quieter life. Children who would grow up far from constant pressure. Michael listened with genuine affection. Then he found himself interrupting. It is complicated. She smiled softly. It always has been. No, he answered after a long pause. Now I understand why. She searched his face. What changed? Michael struggled to explain something he barely understood himself. When you begin carrying responsibility for other people, every decision starts to feel larger than your own happiness. Kay reached across the table. But someone has to protect you too. For a brief moment, he looked away. Because he realized he had stopped asking that question altogether. Inside the Corleone household, the pattern repeated itself in countless quiet moments. Someone worried. Vito solved the problem. Someone hesitated. Michael began offering answers before the silence became uncomfortable. The family welcomed it, not because they desired control, because certainty felt comforting. Every burden Michael accepted relieved someone else of making an impossible choice. Every solution strengthened the belief that protection required central authority. Without anyone intending it, dependence slowly replaced shared responsibility. The family still called it love. They still called it loyalty. They still believed they were preserving one another. But the line separating guidance from control had become almost impossible to see. And once a family begins trusting one person's judgment more than its own conscience, the greatest danger no longer comes from enemies waiting outside the door. It comes from the quiet moment when everyone inside stops believing they can choose differently. The house had never been quieter. Not because there were fewer people, because fewer people believed their voices mattered. Problems still arrived every day, but they no longer traveled through conversation. They traveled directly to Michael. Someone's business was struggling. A marriage inside the extended family had begun to fracture. A longtime friend feared betrayal from an old associate. Each person entered with uncertainty and left carrying the same reassuring sentence: "Michael will handle it." At first, those words sounded like confidence. Eventually, they became surrender. Tom Huggin watched the pattern with growing unease. One evening, after another meeting had emptied the office, he remained behind. "You have become the answer to every question." Michael looked up from a stack of documents. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" Tom paused before speaking. "I am not sure." Michael leaned back. "They trust me." "They do." "Then what is the problem?" Tom walked toward the window where Vito had once spent countless evenings in silence. "The problem is that trust can quietly become dependence." Michael did not answer, because part of him already knew. He had begun solving problems before anyone asked him to. Not out of pride, out of habit. Every conflict he prevented felt like another family spared unnecessary suffering. Every difficult decision he carried meant someone else could sleep peacefully. It felt like love expressed through responsibility. Yet responsibility has a strange appetite. The more it consumes, the hungrier it becomes. Kay felt that hunger long before Michael admitted it existed. Their conversations no longer wandered through ordinary dreams. They revolved around schedules, obligations, unexpected meetings, and responsibilities that never seemed to end. One evening, she asked a question so quietly that it almost disappeared between them. "When was the last time you made a decision simply because it made you happy?" Michael searched his memory. He could not find an answer. Instead, he offered the only explanation that still made sense to him. "Happiness can wait." Kay looked at him with gentle sadness. "Can it?" The silence that followed lingered far longer than either of them expected. Because neither of them was discussing happiness anymore. They were discussing identity. Michael had slowly become someone who measured every choice by the same standard. Would this strengthen the family? Everything else had become secondary. His own desires, his relationships, even the possibility of an ordinary future. Inside the Corleone home, the change reached beyond Michael himself. Connie no longer made important choices without asking for approval. Frito hesitated before expressing disagreement, even in private conversations. Relatives who once relied on instinct now waited for direction. Nobody ordered them to behave this way. It simply felt safer. Protection had become the invisible language of the household. The irony was impossible to ignore. The family had never appeared more united. Yet genuine closeness had become increasingly rare. People shared the same roof while hiding their doubts. They smiled across the dinner table while quietly editing their own thoughts before speaking. Peace had been preserved. Honesty had not. Late one night, Michael entered his father's old office alone. Nothing had changed. The heavy wooden desk, the quiet lamp, the chair facing the window. He rested his hand on the polished surface where Vito had once listened to desperate fathers, frightened friends, and loyal companions searching for impossible answers. Only now did Michael understand the burden that room carried. Power was never the true weight. Expectation was. Everyone who entered expected certainty. And once people begin expecting certainty, admitting uncertainty starts to feel like failure. For the first time, Michael allowed himself to ask a question he had carefully avoided. What if protecting everyone had slowly taught them to stop protecting one another? The thought unsettled him, because it challenged the belief that had guided every sacrifice he had made. Yet the next morning, when another difficult decision arrived at his door, he pushed that question aside. The family still needed an answer. And once again, he chose to become that answer himself. Without realizing it, he crossed a line that his father had approached with caution but never fully embraced. He no longer carried responsibility because circumstances demanded it. He carried it because he had begun to believe no one else should. The hardest prisons are never built with walls. They are built with certainty. By now, Michael no longer questioned whether his choices were justified. Every difficult decision arrived wrapped in the same quiet conviction. Someone had to carry the burden. If that burden happened to isolate him, then isolation was simply another form of sacrifice. That belief made every new compromise feel smaller than the one before. Not because the compromises became easier, because they became familiar. Tom noticed it during one of their late-night conversations. The office was almost identical to the one Vito had once occupied. The same polished desk, the same heavy curtains, the same silence waiting between sentences. There was a time, Tom said carefully, when you asked whether something was the right thing to do. Michael did not look up. And now you ask whether it is necessary. Michael folded his hands. Sometimes those are the same thing. Tom shook his head. Sometimes. The words lingered in the room. Neither man argued. Neither believed the other was acting out of selfishness. That was precisely what made the conversation so unsettling. No villain had appeared. No one was chasing personal glory. Every choice still pointed toward the same destination. Keep the family together. Protect those who depend on you. Prevent tomorrow's suffering. Yet those noble intentions had quietly rewritten the meaning of conscience itself. Michael no longer measured decisions against his own moral discomfort. He measured them against the possibility of losing someone he loved. Once fear becomes the standard, almost every action begins to feel defensible. At home, Kay struggled to recognize the man she had once believed she understood. He still spoke gently. He still listened. He still cared. But he was never entirely present. Even peaceful evenings carried invisible calculations. A phone call interrupted dinner. An unexpected visitor delayed family plans. A conversation with the children ended because another responsibility demanded attention. One evening, she finally asked him the question she had carried for months. When you say you are doing all of this for us, do you ever ask what we actually need? Michael looked genuinely surprised. I know what this family needs. Kay did not raise her voice. I did not ask about the family. She paused. I asked about us. For the first time in a long while, Michael had no immediate answer. Not because he disagreed. Because he realized he had stopped seeing any difference between the two. His marriage, his children, his relatives, his responsibilities. Everything had merged into a single idea. The family. And once every relationship becomes part of one larger mission, individual people slowly disappear beneath the mission itself. The change spread quietly through every corner of the household. Younger relatives stopped solving disagreements on their own. Older members deferred even ordinary decisions. Everyone waited for direction. Not because Michael demanded obedience, because he had trained them, through years of protection, to believe certainty was safer than independent judgment. The irony became almost unbearable. The more faithfully he protected them from difficult choices, the less capable they became of making difficult choices themselves. Late one night, Michael found himself standing alone in the garden where Connie's wedding had once filled the estate with laughter. The music was gone. The guests were gone. Only memory remained. He remembered telling Kay with complete confidence, "That is my family. It is not me." The words now sounded as though they had been spoken by someone else. Somewhere along the journey, the boundary had vanished. He had not entered his father's world because he admired power. He had entered because he believed love required responsibility. Responsibility demanded sacrifice. Sacrifice demanded control. And control slowly convinced him that no one else could be trusted to protect the people he loved. That realization should have frightened him. Instead, it brought an unexpected sense of calm. Because once a person believes there is no alternative, doubt no longer feels like wisdom. It feels like weakness. And that is the quiet moment when the greatest transformation is complete. Not when someone begins doing harmful things, but when they can no longer imagine that choosing differently could also be an act of love. Morning sunlight poured through the windows of the Corleone house exactly as it had on the day Connie was married. The same walls, the same rooms, the same family name. Everything looked unchanged. That was the final illusion. Michael walked through the house before anyone else had awakened. He paused outside each room, listening to the quiet rhythm of ordinary life. Children still slept peacefully. Coffee would soon be brewing in the kitchen. Someone would laugh over breakfast. Someone would ask for advice before lunch. By evening, another difficult decision would arrive. The routine never stopped. For years, he had believed this rhythm proved he was succeeding. Now, for the first time, he wondered whether it merely proved that everyone had learned to depend on him. He found Tom already waiting in the office. "You are here early," Michael said. Tom gave a tired smile. "I could not sleep." Neither man reached for the papers stacked across the desk. Business could wait. Something more important had finally surfaced. Tom looked around the room. "Do you remember your father sitting right there?" Michael nodded. He always seemed certain. Tom's expression softened. "No." Michael frowned. "What do you mean?" "He only allowed us to see certainty." The sentence settled heavily between them. Tom continued quietly. "Your father carried doubt every day. That is what made him careful." Michael remained silent. "I think you have stopped allowing yourself to doubt." The words struck deeper than any accusation ever could. Because they did not question Michael's intentions. They questioned the one thing he had sacrificed everything to preserve. His belief that he was still acting out of love. Later that afternoon, Kay found him sitting alone in the garden. The chair faced the same lawn where laughter had once filled the air during Connie's wedding. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Kay broke the silence. "Do you remember what you told me here years ago?" Michael smiled faintly. "I remember. You said your family's world was not yours." "It was true." She looked at him gently. "It was." Another silence followed. Then she asked the question neither of them had dared to ask before. When did protecting the family stop meaning protecting the people inside it? Michael closed his eyes. Memories surfaced one after another. His father's quiet voice. Tom's cautious advice. Sonny's impatience. The promises made around crowded dinner tables. Every decision had felt temporary. Every sacrifice had seemed necessary. No single moment had transformed him. There had only been one choice after another. Each one small enough to defend. Each one reasonable enough to explain. Until the explanations themselves became stronger than the people they were supposed to serve. He suddenly understood something his younger self could never have imagined. Love had never disappeared. It had simply changed its shape. It no longer asked, "How do I care for the people I love?" It asked, "How do I preserve the system that protects them?" The difference seemed almost invisible. Yet it had changed everything. As evening settled over the estate, members of the family slowly gathered for dinner. They smiled. They embraced. They thanked Michael for everything he had done. Every grateful word should have comforted him. Instead, each expression of trust felt strangely heavy, because he could no longer tell whether they believed in him, or whether they had forgotten how to believe in themselves. Michael looked around the table. Every face represented someone he had spent years trying to shield from uncertainty. Yet the room no longer felt filled with confident adults. It felt filled with people waiting for permission. And in that quiet realization lay the most painful truth of all. A family can survive every threat from the outside. What it may never survive is the moment when love becomes so protective that it quietly replaces another person's freedom with its own certainty.